Today I'm going to be talking about DAW plugin automation, but since the plugins can interpret the data however they want, there's no way to really know what's happening. Even if we implement the plugins ourselves, we can make all sorts of little hacks to have things work however we want, for the better or for the worse. So what I want you to do is, firstly, test everything yourself. You have different plugins than me probably. And secondly, look at the differences between products rather than the absolute results. So first, let me explain how things work. Almost all audio software takes automation or modulation and then chunks it into blocks so that each block can be processed separately. So let's go ahead and take one of those blocks. But the problem is, at the beginning of each block is when it asks for the parameter changes. So for the whole block, your parameter is just that thing. And now you end up with these parameter changes that are just straight lines. And then the plugin knows that, so the plugin has to smooth that, and you end up with something that looks nothing like what you wanted. Another option is parameter history based, where we take our automation or modulation, we split it up into blocks yet again, and then when we look at one of these blocks, we can actually get a parameter change list. So when we're processing the samples, we can ask the list, hey, was there a parameter change happening at this point in time? Now all the parameter changes match up to the samples that are being processed. The other option is to just process everything with a one sample block. So you get parameter changes and samples at the same time for each sample. And that's generally not the best of ideas. You can check the link in the description for the text article where I explain that a little bit more. Testing this is pretty easy. Just add a test signal to a track, create some automation that's a quick jump, and then export everything. Now look at your result. Is that the automation input that you put in? I tried dozens of plugins and they all work differently in different products, but the most consistent results I got were with Melda products, largely because I can control the interpolation in the plugin settings. So first I used mutility to test various DAWs. The most telling differences are going to be when you render the exact same automation with different device buffer sizes. So that's what I did. Reaper's output changed when you changed the device buffer settings. Studio One's start point looks different, and when you switch buffer settings, it also changes the output. Using Pro Tools, I did 4 different renders, but they were the exact same settings. Turns out that for consistent results, you need to render offline always. Otherwise, any glitch will mess up absolutely everything. The timing of automation goes out the window. Except I rendered with really high buffer sizes that I know my computer can handle rendering a single audio file, and the resulting envelope was always different. However, when you use offline processing, everything's fine, and Pro Tools renders things the same, no matter what your device buffer size is. Digital Performer rendered VST3 automation the same every time, but it was always off, even though I set it up very precisely. So I tried audio units in Digital Performer, and it was a little bit better, and it still rendered the same no matter the buffer size. Logic not only has its I/O buffer size, but it also has something called the process buffer range. So does a combination of those change how the automation is rendered when using audio unit plugins? It sure does. I have 2 different buffer sizes combined with 2 different process buffer sizes, and I get 3 different results. In Cubase, automation can be rendered very differently depending on the buffer size. And Live gives a slightly different result, but changing the buffer size changes your automation. FL Studio renders the same no matter what your buffer size is. Awesome. Even cooler is FL Studio has some fairly advanced settings for changing how plugin processing happens. Since it's not entirely fair to use third-party products to test this, because who knows if the third party implemented everything to spec, I went ahead and used a native plugin in each DAW to see how the DAW developers themselves think things should be done, assuming they cared to try and even do it right to begin with. In Reaper, I used a volume-changing JSFX. The code is in the text article, and the results were, Studio One's mix tool wasn't too much different. If you change the buffer size, you get different output. I am not aware of a native gain tool in Pro Tools, so I just used EQ1 to automate the gain, and the results were the same no matter what the buffer size was, even though the smoothing was actually really terrible. Digital Performer's native gain tool was basically perfect. That little residual is because it only turns down to -40 decibels. Logic rendered identically no matter what the I/O buffer size was or what the process buffer size was when using the native gain tool. In Cubase, I use the recently updated frequency plugin to automate the gain, and as we can see, it has some pretty extreme smoothing. But what's difficult to see is that the two renders are over 2 buffer sizes apart. Ableton Live's native gain plugin rendered identically for any buffer size, and it has fairly pleasant smoothing. Fruity Balance also rendered identically no matter what the buffer size is. If your DAW is asking for the parameter change at the beginning of the block, then where the beginning of the block is matters. So depending on where playback or render starts means that you could get different results. I'm not going to be showing you graphs of the offset thing because this whole thing has been a lot of work, and that's why I didn't include Ardour and Waveform. You can get Ardour for free, get a binary very cheap. Traction 7 is free. Go download them, try them, see how they work. Maybe you'll like other things about them better than the software you have. Explore your own software. This stuff is really easy to test. Don't trust me. All I want to show you is that there are differences and that it's really easy to figure out how your software works so you can produce better results with the workflow that you enjoy. So thank you for watching. AdmiralBumblebee.com, where there's a text version of this article, and patreon.com/AdmiralBumblebee, where you can donate some money because this takes a lot of time. This thing took almost over 100 hours just to put together this video and make sure that content was hopefully mostly correct. So have a good day. Thanks for watching.